Hello and welcome to Light from Light. I'm joined by my good friend Giovanni Castellano, and in our last episode, which I think was on Saint Giordano and Salone, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We promised an episode on Saint Nicholas because at the moment Giovanni lives at the Shrine of Saint Nicholas in Bari, in Puglia, which is southern Italy. Very beautiful place, right near the sea. More on the sea later. How Saint Nicholas's body comes to Bari. But yeah, I think maybe a good place to begin is how we know Saint Nicholas existed. Because there was a period of time, was there not, where quite a few people, important scholars, would also say, well, maybe actually he didn't exist, that the evidence was really spurious. And of course, later he comes to be associated with Father Christmas or Santa Claus, depending on where you are, which just feeds into this cultural idea that really St. Nicholas is a fictitious character. So how do we know that St. Nicholas existed?
Yeah, his existence has been challenged very much, and part of the reason is that there are all these layers of legend since the antiquity, which got a bit the historical data confused. And on top of that, there was also another Saint Nicholas of the same region, whose story over time was mingled with his own. So it was a bit of a riddle, and many historians started to challenge his existence, and they said we actually know nothing for certain apart from legends about him. And after the council in the new liturgical calendar, his memorial had even been downgraded from being a compulsory, an obligatory memorial to an optional one. And that only changed actually very recently. I think in 2017, the Congregation for Worship made his memorial on December the 6th again obligatory. Part of the reason is his importance for ecumenism, as we will see, but also because a brother of my community, a Dominican who is still living here in Bari, has done a huge amount of work to prove that actually we do have reliable sources, and we can be confident that we know something about his life, and that he existed is really out of question. So he's written this little book, which
A
was
doorstop.
the Nicholas in historical critique. Not something I would suggest for a bedtime reading, really, but it's really a thorough research, and it's the main reason why nowadays no one would really dare to challenge his existence and a few things that we do know about him.
So what are the sources then? What are the sources and what do they say? What do we know about his life?
Yeah, we know that he was born in the second half of the first century, what we now call Turkey. At the time, it was a Greek-speaking part of the world in Asia Minor, in the region of Lycia, in the city of Patara. And from there, he moved with his family to the city with which he's usually associated, which is Myra. There, he was elected a bishop by popular acclaim while he was still a layperson, something which would be unthinkable nowadays, where the process of becoming a bishop much more complex and it requires a certain protocol. But at the time, if you were a good Christian, you people thought you had the right qualities, you had a good standing in the community. Why not? Let's just make you a bishop. So that's what happened to him.
And there are quite a few saints who that happened to, where I know you've said before, bishops of Rome even knew by public acclaim, and there's something that happens. I think is it in Switzerland where there's like a vote of like a chapter or something, and it goes to Rome, and yeah, so there are still complicated processes which date back quite a way, or still in quite a way, still in some places in the church. Um, but yeah, so then we have evidence that he existed, that he went to Myra. Uh, what about the Council of Nicaea, right? Because a lot of people would say, oh, well, Nicholas was present at the Council of Nicaea. What documentary evidence do we have about that, if anything?
Yeah, that's another much disputed question. Many historians claim that it was all a legend and that we have no sources. Now, it's true that his name is not present in the most ancient lists of bishops who attended the Council of Nicaea, but there is no such thing as a complete list of bishops who were there. So his absence doesn't mean he wasn't there. And in fact, he is present in a number of lists, including a very reliable and authoritative one by Theodorus the Lector. Plus, he's always been venerated as rule of faith, regula fidei. So that makes us think that he was somehow part of the Christological theological controversies of his time. He was a contemporary of Arius, after all. So it also makes us think that he was on the right side of the debate. He was on the part of Athanasius and what then became the Nicene Creed. So actually, there is evidence that he was there, and there is no reason to say 100% he wasn't there, he couldn't have been there. Actually, he was from that region, not so far away from Nicaea. So it sounds very much possible that he was at Nicaea.
So he has this title. He's from the area. He's from the right time period. And yeah, no, very interesting. We had Dr. Sarah Parvis on recently on the podcast to talk about the Council of Nicaea, and her scholarly opinion is certainly that St. Nicholas was there. Whether St. Nicholas punched Arius in the face or not is
Yes,
something up for debate.
yes.
What's the there's a legend about that, isn't there? And he gets arrested or something.
Yes, it's in the iconography. You often find Saint Nicholas receiving the episcopal insignia and the gospel from Christ and Our Lady. And the legend is that after that he punched Darius, the emperor was very upset by his behavior. So they put him into prison, but there, as a kind of confirmation of his choice of punching Arius, he had been deprived of his episcopal garments, but Christ gave him the gospel, and Our Lady herself gave him back his homophorion, this stole worn by bishops in the Eastern fashion. So the legend is that our Lord and Our Lady themselves went and told him in prison, and in a way confirmed what he had done.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because like the idea that there'd be a church council that causes not just disagreement but physical fighting. I
Mm.
mean, and that's something that you very much see at the time, where different regions following different bishops and things, there was real conflict around this, and that the emperor has some sort of role to play. I know Sarah has this really interesting perspective about whether Nicaea was really an imperial council or not. And she has a very interesting take about why the council really is a papal council that the imperial court tried to take over, and how this has like a fallout later. But yeah, this idea that you can have something that's fundamentally a theological disagreement about the nature of Christ that causes such a virulent response from Christians on different sides of
Clearly
an argument.
about doctrine is
Yeah,
my
exactly. About doctrine. Theology matters, right? Theology matters, doctrine matters,
yes.
and yeah, I mean it's a remarkable time.
Get into a fight.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not go around punching people. It's a good thing that we don't
Yeah.
have the violence, but um, the fact that they cared so much about the content of the faith and doctrine and truth is still a noble thing, even if sometimes it led to their irascible
True.
passions getting the better of their reason. So yeah, interesting, an interesting thing. Maybe we could say a little bit about then the iconography. Like you've already mentioned very briefly some of the iconography, but sometimes he's depicted as carrying these like three like globes or spheres. Like
Yeah.
what's all that about?
Yeah, if you see icons of holy bishops and you want to be sure that that's Saint Nicholas, what you're looking for is really these three golden spheres, which are usually set on the book or the gospel. So whilst it's quite intuitive why a bishop might have a gospel, uh, the three spheres can be a bit of a mystery if you don't know about it. I think most people will say it's for, again, for his defense of orthodoxy and Nicaea. So the three spheres are a sign of the doctrine of the Trinity. But historically, it's more likely that they first referred to an episode of his life, which shows why he was such a beloved figure by the people, basically because he was a bishop who did uh, well, one which is or the most important tasks of a bishop, which is caring for the poor. In
Mm,
the it was very, very clear. The bishop, one of the titles of a bishop was the friend of the poor. Caring for the poor is really top priority for any Christian, much more so for a bishop. And he did that. The famous episode is that there were these three young ladies in his city whose father couldn't afford to pay a dowry for each of them to get married. So at the time, there was the risk that they would get into bad ways and even prostitution in order uh, to survive, basically, because they were poor.
mm.
But Nicholas dropped from the window of their household these three little bags of gold in secret, as the gospel, after all, commands us to do when we are doing almsgiving. And so the three golden spheres are the artistic representation of these three little bags of coins of money, basically, that he gave them. And interestingly, Aquinas, when he's talking about almsgiving in the Summa, in the Secunda Secunda, he refers to this episode of Saint Nicholas' life as a model for that.
Interesting, very interesting. You told me something. You've told me something before that I didn't realize. That famous incident when St. Thomas says, "Everything I've written, it's all as straw." You told me that happened on St. Nicholas's feast day, right? The
Yes,
6th of December. And
the 6th of December 1273.
am I right in saying I could be wrong about this? But am I right in thinking that there's a big Dominican priory also in the north that's dedicated to St. Nicholas? Or am
Well,
I
our
misremembering?
church, our church in Bologna, which is now St. Dominic's Church, where there is this body, when we first got there, it wasn't in
Dedicated to St. Nicholas.
the country yard, and it was called San Nicolò delle Vigne, Saint Nicholas of the Vineyards, because it was in the.
Okay.
So what that church was originally dedicated to Saint Nicholas. We've had always this link, the Dominicans as Saint Nicholas, which now is stronger because, as you know, since 1951, we've been the guardians of his body here in Bari and of the Pontifical Basilica, which has been here for almost 1,000 years.
What um, is our modern connection in Bari? Because we didn't always have the basilica in Bari under our care, because it's a papal basilica, right? So it comes directly under the Holy Father, and then he entrusts it to somebody to take care of the basilica and the needs associated with the basilica. So when did we become associated with Saint Nicholas in Bari?
So yeah, the basilica was kept for centuries by a chapter of canons, so of priests living together, basically. And for centuries, it was actually under royal protection. it was only with the end of the monarchy in Italy that it became a pontifical basilica, so directly not under the local bishop but under the pope. But after World War II, the chapter was almost extinguished, and things weren't going well. Italy had changed politically also a lot, so there was no need to give a new life to the basilica. So they thought a religious order would be a good fit. They actually first asked the Benedictines, which didn't think that the place and the kind of mission of the place would fit well with their monastic life. They then asked the Dominicans, which are more of a missionary order. And so we've been here since 1951. And I think it was a very good choice. We've done a lot of work, not just keeping the shrine, but doing a lot of ecumenical work, founding an ecumenical institute here, and doing a lot for the sake of ecumenism. And in fact, Pope Francis came here twice. John Paul II came as well, and the Patriarch of Constantinople and lots of Orthodox bishops and faithful. Just because Saint Nicholas is so much beloved in the Orthodox Church, so by his very nature is a bridge between West and East, and that makes him humanism.
Is it like how did he end up then in Bari? Because I mean, I know a little bit about this story and the sort of the infamy of how he got his relics. Because of course, I mean, he's from Asia Minor, dies in Myra, I think, and so how does he end up in Italy? He didn't die in Italy, so what happened there?
Yeah, this story, if it had happened like today, it would sound very nice. But in the Middle Ages, they clearly had other standards. So basically, what had happened is that Bari had ceased to be the capital for the Byzantine Empire in southern Italy. So they did something to boost the economy and relaunch the image of the city, give it importance again. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna
Pilgrimages.
we're gonna go and get the bones, the relics of a famous saint, and that will be our fortune. Well, again, this moving, someone might say stealing, someone might say a rescue mission, but whichever category you use, this wasn't so uncommon in the Middle Ages. I mean, why do we have all these relics of apostles in southern Italy? They clearly weren't from Sicily, and they didn't die here. So that wasn't so uncommon. So they went there. 62 tailors. They left Bari in the year 1087, so it's almost 1000 years, and they got to Myra and they got the relics. And it wasn't a very nice thing to do. There was a shrine, there were, many people would go there, and there were monks there, and the people from Bari weren't kind of pacifists. They went there with weapons because they knew they would find resistance. One of the monks tried to get to the city and warn the people of Myra, but it didn't make it. And so they managed to, we got to say, they managed to steal the relics. So that's why.
Thou shalt not steal. Huh? Um, what is the other thing I was going to say? I was going to. There's another story about St. Nicholas, which I think is a really beautiful one, where somebody is condemned to death. Right? He's associated with prisoners. What's this story? Remind
Yeah,
me.
another story is that there were like turmoils, and in this situation, three innocent people were just picked from the crowd and sentenced to death. And when he knew that, he defended them basically and made sure that they weren't beheaded. He prevented them from being beheaded. So from that time on, he was associated also with prisoners and as a defender of the innocent.
Remarkable. Maybe you could say something. I mean, I said before, I'm a great fan of relics. And St. Nicholas, of course, has a very distinguishing relic. Not only is his body in Bari, but they also have this like secretion that comes from the bones that you call the holy manna.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me that, only if you're like, the Pope or the Patriarch of Constantinople, you get pure manna. But it's this sort of liquid that comes from the bones, right? Which is quite strange because the bones are dry. So why is this liquid coming from them? But it's a relic. It's a relic. So what is this liquid that comes from the bone?
Yeah.
Have there been any tests done on it, or is there any understanding of why this is happening, or is this considered miraculous? What's going on there?
Yeah, there has been talk of this manna since the antiquity, and when the people from Mari got there, they said we found the bones floating in this liquid, which looks like water. It's been analyzed, and it's just pure water, like not water from the sea, because since the tomb here and the basilica is right by the sea, some people might think, oh, it's just infiltration of seawater, because we are basically almost in the sea, right? But it isn't seawater. It's a very pure kind of chemical composition. Uh, so some people think that it's a miraculous liquid which comes out of the bone and well, the bones, and clearly that shouldn't happen. Bones should turn into dust, clearly not produce a liquid. But I mean, the very fact that this liquid is in contact with the relics that makes it a relic of St. Nicholas. The
Right.
reason that we don't give it to everybody in its pure form is that it's not very much. So every year on May the 9th, there is the solemnity of the translation of the relics. And the tradition is that the prior of St. Nicholas community goes there, he kneels, and with a kind of mechanism with a straw, they take this liquid out of the tomb, and it's not very much every year. It's not produced in massive quantity, so we don't have very much. But it's also given to, for instance, churches where they want to dedicate an altar, and maybe the parish is dedicated to Saint Nicholas because it is a real relic. So
Mm.
but if you come to Bari, what you're gonna get is that what you got is a nice little bottle, which is mainly holy water, blessed water, with a little amount of manna, which has been mixed with a huge amount of water. It's just because it's very little, and you can't give it really to everybody. But our Orthodox brothers, who are perhaps more keen than us of this physical, concrete signs and sacramentals, they really care about the manna, and there are lots of witnesses and stories about the healing power of this relic since again an ancient time.
Mm. One of the titles of St. Nicholas is the Wonder Worker or the Miracle Worker, which again I
Yeah.
think is quite an old title and sort of attests to the fact that when people were going on pilgrimage to his tomb, when they prayed to him, remarkable and miraculous things happened. So when you think about it, the fact that he becomes associated with Father Christmas or Santa Claus, it's not only about sort of gift giving in that sense of being kind to those who are poor, or he's also associated with young children. I'll ask you to tell that story in a moment. Or those who are imprisoned, who are deprived of their liberty, so poor in that way. It's also about these miraculous healings and these miraculous gifts, which, of course, come through his intercession. Through the pilgrimages that people would make. There are particular seasons, aren't there? Particular times that are
Mm.
particularly busy for the shrine. Presumably around his feast day in December. Uh,
Yeah,
but that's the
but
Latin calendar, right?
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing, that the same things happen also in the Julian calendar, the Orthodox calendar. So in December we got on the 6th is the Catholic feast of St. Nicholas, and then about less like 2 weeks later, about 2 weeks later, it's the same feast for the Orthodox. So the beautiful thing about this shrine is that, and why it's really a living ecumenism that we have here, is that the Orthodox have celebrated for decades on our same altar. So we're really same place of worship. So here it's just normal that we all stay together, we all worship God and venerate the same saint. And even those Orthodox churches, which historically have been more hostile to the Catholic Church, here they are the most, the friendliest and the most helpful, and volunteer in the shrine, and they also care very much, and they're friends of the Dominican community, which cares for the shrine. So it's not just ecumenism, a sort of academic work that one does, but it's what has been called ecumenism of the people of God, charity, the ecumenism and the unity which passes through relationship and mutual respect. And that's perhaps the most important step for any.
And there is, I mean, because they do have their own chapel, I know,
In the
downstairs
crypt.
in the crypt, just next to where his relics are kept under the altar. So the fact that they use the same altar that that the Latins use, is quite a big deal, actually, considering some of the historical difficulties that we've had. That they have not only do they have a dedicated space there that's for them and for their use, but also that we do share, this common liturgical space, this holy space together. Is really remarkable, and probably because we have this shared heritage with Nicaea, and this mutual veneration. That's one of the things that enables, as you say, enables this relationship to develop. It's also, I think, a great place that you can go there on holiday as well as on pilgrimage,
Um,
and
yeah,
you can put the two together, right? Great
yeah.
food, you're right by the sea, the people are lovely, and then what better than to have this great shrine of this church father, essentially. Wonderful, really, really wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on again, talking about St. Nicholas. We'll have to do
Thank
this again sometime. We'll have you, we'll have you back on soon. I've got no doubt, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. We're going to be at an ordination this weekend, and
Yes.
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Bye.
God bless.